Today, I'm with Kian Bakhtiari, founder of The People, a Gen Z-focused consultancy. We talk about the benefits of being from elsewhere, the challenges of running a startup, and explore how to take his business and ideas to the next level. I hope you enjoy it.
You'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosna. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the career equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career.
I'm delighted to have you here today. A very, very warm welcome.
Thank you, Erica. I'm really excited to be joining you in conversation.
And there are other good things about you that you didn't put in your standard bio, like you are a regular contributor to Forbes. That's pretty impressive. And that clients include folks like Diesel, Danone, Pentland Brands, and the United Nations, no less. But I'd like us to start with a little bit of comparing notes, because we are both people who grew up in London with parents from somewhere else, who run our own businesses in the kind of imagination, creative services space. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and experiences and how, if at all, you feel like that's informed what you're doing now.
I grew up in Iran. I did my first year of school there, so I've got formative memories of life in Iran. And then I came to the UK when I was 8, didn't speak English. Everything was alien to me. I could hear people speaking, but I didn't know what they were saying. But when you're young, you pick stuff up quite quickly. So even though it's new to you, you socialize and you adapt. For me, what that taught me was a couple of things. First was the adaptability of new environments, change, and being quite comfortable with uncertainty in a way that's really served me. And I would say the other is probably being a bit of an outsider, being able to view things from external outside lens rather than the in-group. When you have nothing to lose, you just approach things in a different way. There is that mentality of, okay, here's an opportunity. I'm going to try my best to make the most of it.
Taking time out to reflect on how your background, experiences and education informed your perspective on the world is a key element of the career equation method. Reflecting on what and who mattered most to us earlier in life provides valuable insights on where your values originated and where your talents lie. When we look back, we often see more of the golden thread, the heart of who we are and what we're trying to achieve or strive for. And this can help us be more conscious and more confident about our decision-making going forward.
My mother she was born in India, but her family originally from Iraq. She's an Iraqi Jew. They're a kind of very small minority there these days. There was a film recently about the last Jew in Baghdad. There is only one Jew left in Baghdad. And my father's family are from Eastern Europe, so they are Eastern European Jews. He grew up in Russia, but his family of origin was slightly further afield towards Poland and Ukraine. Growing up in London where there is everybody, all these kind of different languages and cultures, I think has always made me really have a strong sense of pleasure and curiosity about food, culture, history, religion. You were still sort of fairly unusual if you came from elsewhere. And I went to a private school, so doing that too was relatively unusual. Never got the star part in the play at school because you weren't quite the right shade. Didn't look exactly how you were supposed to. Like those kinds of things I sort of noticed later that actually, I wasn't eligible for some things, for some groups, for some communities. But like you, I think in many ways that has served me because it's given me an outsider perspective, which as a consultant means you just look at things from slightly different angle that can be really valuable at times. I enjoyed reading your article in Forbes about the 7 trends that are likely to emerge. It was 2023, but I actually thought they were incredibly current and relevant. And the one in particular I wanted to pick up on was you talked about preparedness for life on either side of the spectrum. You said, 40 somethings need support with how to find meaning and purpose in the later half of their life, but that Gen Z needed help with digital skills and preparedness for work. And I was quite surprised to hear digital skills, because the perception is that Gen Zs are digi-natives. Tell me about what you were thinking about when you said there's actually a need to cover these bases around digital skills and readiness for work.
Every year I do a piece around cultural trends. It helps me think, okay, where is the world heading? Where it came from was just this idea of noticing, and I'm sure you see it all the time, the way we set up the world and careers, it's still very much embedded in the old world of the Industrial Revolution and factories and the 19th century. And in the 19th century, nearly every country, people didn't live for more than 40 years. Now, young people are growing up, and this is a generalization. There are nuances to this, different countries, socioeconomic groups, but in general, young people who are entering kind of the professional world, we tend to think they're super technologically savvy, they've got all the skills, but often they're not able to kind of learn the skills on the job because of remote working, or they might not have that connection with their manager and older people in the business. So it's also about how do you create an exchange where young people can learn from previous generations. There's a lot we've gained, but at the same time, back in the day, you could have, I'm sure, like an internship where you're exposed to how the business or the company or the charity is run in a way that's really hard to do if you're kind of starting out in a remote work and you don't really see all the parts of the operation.
Yeah, I think that's so true. We do a lot of work with a number of different businesses who all had quite different perspectives post-COVID about returning to work. And I remember that I was having a conversation with an MD of a really significant global property business. And he was saying to me, the reason I want everyone back, it's because of exactly that. That is how our education works. It's by sitting alongside and learning together. I'm particularly concerned about the mental health impacts for our younger community of employees sitting at the end of a bed, not in a nice working environment. How are they supposed to master all this stuff? And how are they supposed to feel part of something? That's why I want them back in. And I thought that was really thoughtful. Whether you are young or a new joiner, but later on, how do you get that sense of community and identity? And of course, your work is in many ways fundamentally about getting alongside one another and learning from one another, whether it's the mentoring piece that we're going to talk a bit about, or whether it's the youth advisory boards, it's actually having the voice of a younger generation within the space, but recognizing, as you say, that there are gaps in everyone's knowledge when we join the workplace, and that perhaps those are going to be different for this generation to the ones previous.
Totally. And that point around learning from each other as well is really important, because ultimately it's a two-way road, as you mentioned.
Can you tell the listeners what a youth advisory board is, why it's important, how it works, and what you'd like to see happen more of, less of, in terms of your questions around it?
Yeah, sure. I guess where this came from, and just a bit of background. So the people have been running for 6 years, and our mission is to amplify the voices of young people. And by doing so, we help to diversify and future-proof companies. And we initially started Erica very much in the space of marketing brands, which we still do, campaigns, project-based work. But increasingly, we realize if we want to include the voices of young people and really lead change, it needs to be embedded into the heart of the business. It can't be this kind of external periphery thing, which has brought us to youth advisory boards. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. So the premise is you've got a board of directors, and I'm sure they're super experienced. They've developed lots of skills. They understand the business. But also our provocation is, why, if you're looking towards the future, why don't you have a youth board of directors that help you shape what the future of your business looks like? Because often the future doesn't look exactly the same as the past. And often the companies that don't adapt and understand the changing needs of the world are the ones that are disrupted rather than being able to make an impact And often we hear one of the biggest challenges is young people don't feel that they can have a say. Often we talk about the future, whether it's climate change, politics, whether it's business. The future belongs to them, but they're not involved in the decision-making and participatory process. So what we're trying to do with the Youth Advisory Board is make sure young people are at the heart of decision-making.
How successful have you been? What kind of results do you get from it?
It's been amazing so far. So we've launched 5 Youth Advisory Boards to date. It makes an impact on different levels. So one, you've got businesses and you've got senior leaders, and for them to see perspectives of young people, it brings them closer to society and the next generation of citizens, employees, and consumers. So it really closes the gap between business and communities. And then the second level is the ideas, recommendations that members make. Some of them are amazing. All of them are amazing, and they're doing such interesting work. So they're able to see the business in a fresh light. And because of that, they can make recommendations or suggest ideas that were never on the list. And then thirdly, I think decisions aren't just made top down. At the heart of it, I think it's actually a fundamentally different business model for the 21st century.
Business leaders and product designers note, to what extent are you actively involving younger populations in consultation, product design, and innovation? Is there untapped insight in your talent pool that could help you break new ground? We often turn to market research and insight from specialist agencies, but there may well be excited and insightful colleagues who have a groundbreaking idea and the career hunger to see progress. How could you seek them out and provide timely opportunities for development that are a win-win on both sides?
Yeah, and it strikes me that it's not just for business, it's also for government, communities, the economy, for anywhere where we take decisions that have implications for future generations. Matt McCartney talks about this idea of the children's fire, which is this decision-making criteria that says when you make a decision, you should be mindful of 7 generations hence. The decision should be positively impactful for 7 generations. And 7 generations, not just of human beings, but of all creatures. You know, that sort of long time perspective is also brought to the table by having a younger generation close by and thinking about it. So let's take that challenge of how do we amplify the Youth Advisory Board? How do we support and develop a new generation of leaders? And let's put it through the career equation lens and see where we get to. Each week, we ask our guest, today it is you, to tell us 4 stories. So briefly, for your understanding, the career equation consists of 4 things. It says you're thriving at work when you use something you're really good at, when you apply that to something that you really care about, to a passion, and when you generate an impact or result that's meaningful for you in an environment that suits you to be your best. I'm going to share with you 4 questions that are really about 4 moments in your life. And we're going to see what we can learn from those moments about you and about your question of how do we amplify and create an environment that's for a new generation of leaders. Question number 1, a time when you were little where you realized that there was something that you were really very good at. Can you tell me about a time you remember?
When I was little, I think the thing that reoccurringly comes up for me is I was really, like nearly all children, I was super curious. So I'd love to explore and I'd ask a lot of questions, which probably drove my parents crazy. But they kind of tolerated me and they would do their best to answer all my weird questions of why is this like this? Why is the sky blue? Why do we do this like this? Alongside that, I had this sense of play and exploration. When I was growing up, I was allowed to do that in a way that I was always kind of out and I'd just come back home. What I got from that was just this freedom to be able to explore, ask questions and imagine. And I kept that, Erica, even when I came here and I went to school. But the same thing that was a strength, I think, is I'd like to think I didn't lose that element of curiosity as I went to school, but it did get me into a lot of trouble because suddenly in a school environment where you're taught to kind of follow the rules,
Yeah.
I'm questioning all the rules, and some teachers loved me, but other teachers didn't.
Less so, let's say. Less so.
Yes.
But I really get that kind of experimenting, exploring, imagining, curiosity about the what, why, and how. You're right that many children are curious, but not all of them in that particular way. There was an element of also exploring internally and externally, so kind of geographically and, you know, in relation to the context you're in, as well as your inner world and your imagination as well, I imagine.
It's as much to do with conditions as well. I was just kind of almost left to my own device.
You had to find some way to amuse yourself, so you got nosy and inquisitive in response.
Correct.
There was a piece of research I saw recently that said the more toys you give kids, the less they use them. I'm very conscious with my little boy that actually there's only 2 or 3 things that he's really into. The rest of the time he just makes stuff, right? He's really into at the moment filling vessels with water. And this takes a long time and he does a lot of it. And it's part of that exploratory process. You don't need much actually to be curious about the world if you're experiencing everything for the first time. But it's when you've seen more than 10 caterpillars, when you've been to different parts of the world, how do you retain that
really
engagement, curiosity,
because in that
and
example,
wonder that
with
I
your
think
son,
you're
like
describing?
when you have less toys, you almost have to imagine and create your own stories and narratives around it. So there's a element of creativity that comes with that.
And that boredom can be good for you. I think that's the other thing, that our modern life doesn't always allow for the space, for the time to get bored and then creativity to arise. And I thought in your TEDx about a sort of crisis of imagination, that I can imagine this little boy, always curious and still full of wonder, has managed to find the place to keep that alive in an environment that's very busy, where it would be easy to never get bored and to always just have stimulus coming towards you.
I grew up in a world where there wasn't any kind of electronic devices, no mobile phones. So it's a different world where I got to play and I had to create my own stories and entertainment.
So the antidote to an uncreative life is to stay playful and less serious. Ken Robinson talks about this idea of schools killing creativity, you know, that actually we're all geniuses up until we start conforming with schools, which of course were designed for the Industrial Revolution as a childcare facility and to create people who would compliantly go to work in a factory and do as they're told. So there's a whole other conversation about where and how we educate for the 21st century, but it's definitely clear to me curiosity and wonder was informing and is still informing how you go about your work. But it also strikes me that it is something to be protected in your work, not just for you, but for the generations that you are working with.
Totally. Like to your kind of school example, just as an anecdotal example to bring that to life. For example, I remember very vividly when I was in I think it was GCSE history. The curriculum was around America and the kind of Great West. And I just asked the question of, this is all great, but why are we not covering kind of Native Americans and the kind of indigenous people? And that's the kind of question that's not necessarily rewarded. You don't get a A or A plus questioning the curriculum. So I do wonder, to your point, how many really talented, creative, able, divergent young people are being assessed and losing their spark just because the system isn't set up to celebrate and support them.
Yeah. And this, I think, probably brings us to our second piece, which is I asked you about a moment in your work where you knew that you really loved what you did. And I know that your work is often dedicated to education and inclusion. So tell us a bit about what it looks and feels like when it happens.
It's not easy work, if I'm honest, but I feel really blessed to wake up every day and work on something that I'm really passionate about and love. And hopefully it's of service to others and society. And hopefully it makes a small impact. Our work is very much focused around amplifying the voices of young people, by doing that, there's also benefit to business where they get to think about, okay, what does the future look like for us? How can we be not just focused internally, but how can we have a positive impact on society at large? And that looks different every day. And I actually really love the variety of it. Yes. I think I'm one of those people, if I was doing one thing, I would really struggle, Erica.
So variety definitely works for you. And I also hear that there's a real kind of loving, sort of supportive win-win underneath all of this as well. That is like, it's possible for everyone to have what they need if we think about this a little bit differently. Can you tell us a story of when you did this? Can you give us a kind of case study from one of the projects you've run recently so people can get a feel for how it could work?
Firstly, you're absolutely right. It's about a shift in business going from competition to collaboration. Just to give you an example, we did some work with L'Oreal Diesel. All their products are for him and for her. And their challenge was, what does this mean to a new generation that doesn't really ascribe to those gender norms? So often our work is, the world is changing, society's shifting. How do we adapt to that? And the way we did that was we built a council of young people from LGBTQ plus community, non-binary, to share their lived experience, which then informed their future strategy on not just how to communicate, but also overall understanding internally.
Potentially leads to a whole new range of products, a whole new customer, a tremendous opportunity to really relate to a group they previously overlooked and not necessarily understood. And again, not intentionally, but just in terms of keeping up with what's real in society now.
Often, again, it's just about interaction. Our role is these two worlds don't often meet. We try to create that space for these two worlds to interact. We set up a mentoring program for Pentner Brands, which is different sports and lifestyle brands. And it was for young people from diverse ethnic minority and low socioeconomic backgrounds. And it was an amazing opportunity for them to connect with professionals at different levels. Mm-hmm. But it was also a great opportunity for the mentors to be exposed to the challenges, ambitions, and the hopes of young people trying to enter the world of work.
Tell me about some of the moving moments or findings from having an impact in that way with the mentoring scheme.
It's in our name, like we're called the people. So for us, the biggest moments and the happiest moments aren't necessarily to do with volume or number of people. It's about individual stories and transformation. So when we see a young person and we see their journey from where they started towards getting a job or getting an internship or feeling more confident about themselves, that's the reason we exist. And I'm sure you see this as a kind of business owner. It's not easy. That's the stuff that makes everything else worthwhile. It reminds me that's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm persisting when all the odds are against us.
Yeah, for sure. Those chances to have an individual impact and a life-changing impact, the right job, the right opportunity, the right mentoring. How many of us remember just one person who really took an interest or one moment at which we made a key decision with support that really changed the course of our lives. So it's a great privilege to be in that space with people and to help make that happen. Our last moment is about environment, because we say that environment is the thing that makes the biggest difference in a thriving career. I'd like to take you down a darker turn and to ask you to tell me about a moment when your environment did not suit you. What was going on with that environment really did not support you to do your work well. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm already getting flashbacks as you mentioned the question. As you're probably aware, when you start a business, you kind of, especially at the beginnings, you have to do everything and you wear lots of hats. I think what I tried to do at the very start, I tried to kind of average out and level out my skills and abilities, trying to be relatively okay at everything. That wasn't much fun. And more importantly, it wasn't effective or impactful. And what I've learned probably the hard way over the years is much better to focus on the areas you're more suited towards, talented at, than try to kind of average yourself at areas where you find really challenging. So for me, repetitive tasks, logistical stuff, whenever things go into too much detail, my brain starts to hurt. Whereas vision, strategy, imagining what things could be, ideas, I think that's where I come alive. It's not to say you don't do those stuff. There are people much more talented, able, skilled at those things. So it's been a journey for me knowing which parts to delegate and learn from others.
And I think that's so natural. I think that, like, we very much say that you should play to your strengths and not try to be brilliant at everything. That actually the sweet spot where your brilliance lies is quite small. But that's good because there's lots of people in the world and each of them have a different sweet spot. So between them all, you can cover with excellence whatever it is that you need to do. But actually, given our natural dispositions and talents, there are going to be some things that you're going to be just about competent at if you're lucky. And trying to go from competent to exceptional, from a 2 to a 10, is almost impossible in many spheres if you don't have the natural disposition. Whereas if you've got the natural disposition, you sort of start already as a 6 or a 7. And so continuing to get to exceptional is the kind of enjoyable edge of an 8, 9, 9.5, right? I really get that. And I think it's a real strength to learn that isn't for me. And actually this person is exceptional at that, whether it's creating order or executing on a beautiful event or whatever it is that you know that you're less able with. It's really important to know that. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's really valuable. Let's have a go at putting it all together. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to give you the framework of what we call the career design, and you are going to fill in the gaps based on the conversation that we've just had. So the first gap is your name. So I'm going to say I, and then you're going to tell us your name.
Kian.
I, Kian, will use my skills in. And now I'd like you to choose, given the conversation, what are the top 2 standout, beautiful gifts you've been given that you will never get tired of using in your work?
Curiosity and imagination.
Great. I, Kian, will use my skills in curiosity and imagination. And let's go to passion and my passion for. So this is what gives you pleasure. What were the things in the conversation that just really ignited for you? Again, this is what matters most to me.
My passion for amplifying the voices of young people.
Amplifying the voices of young people. 2, and here we're talking about impact. What's the result that you most want to measure when it comes to feeling successful in your work?
Can it be 2 things?
Yeah?
To create business impact and social change.
Beautiful. To create business impact and social change. Environmentally, what are the factors that make the biggest difference for you? Like, where do you do your best work? And again, just reflecting back on what we've said and how we've said it, what helps you really feel alive, vital, and do great work? An environment that is
open-minded, collaborative, and playful.
Nice. Yeah, works best for me is how we tend to complete it. Works best for me. So I'm going to play this back to you. You're going to let me know how well it lands in terms of an accurate description of the inside out, the fundamentals of your career DNA and how it might live in the world. I, Kian, will use my skills in curiosity and imagination and my passion for amplifying the voices of young people to create business impact and social change. An environment that is open-minded, collaborative and playful works best for me.
That sounds amazing. Elements of that I've known intuitively, but to see it all pieced together like a puzzle or a painting, it's going from brushes towards the whole picture.
I'm happy to hear that. It's surprisingly quick as a process, isn't it? And it's inside out. So you already know all of this, as you said. If we were going to put a scoring system to it and say, how well are you living that right now in your work, with 1 being terrible and 10 being brilliant, Where would you put yourself on the scale?
I'm quite a kind of, as you might have found out by now, I'm quite a glass half full person. But I would say 7.
Yeah.
Solid 7.
What's the next level? What's the work in progress?
I would say the environment, definitely, partly, and just continuing. It's a journey.
Yeah. Nice to have bandwidth on the road, isn't it? You know,
Totally.
If you already got to 10, it's kind of like a cul-de-sac. It's quite difficult to go any further. Back to your original question of how do we equip future leaders and young leaders? What does the clarity of your own equation provoke for you in your thinking in answering that question?
I think it's a great question and one I want to reflect further, but I think part of it is equipping young people with the tools to be able to imagine a future that's different to the current. So for them not to become almost indoctrinated in the current world and giving them the environment where they can thrive.
It sounds to me like a curriculum drawn from your own experience and observations, but also from your unique quality and character of retaining that sense of playfulness, of creativity. And for me, the key thing that I really, really heard that I thought was so powerful was this opportunity for collaboration that isn't about worlds colliding. Because, you know, when you think about like any youth movement, whether it's like the 60s or punk or Greta, whatever, there is always a kind of bang. It's like a collision. It's like, you know, do we have to be this way? Can we not find a way to go, ooh, rather than, ah? And I think you have a unique ability to name that and to systematize that as a toolkit.
In that case, I better get to it, Erica.
Right. No more time, like the present. But before you go, 2 things I want to ask you. The first is, if you look back at little Kian and his nosy sense of wonder, what message would you give him? What would you say to him as you look at him?
It's a really simple one, but just like, keep being you.
We all need a bit more of that message, don't we? You're lovely just as you are.
Totally.
In the equation method, so often, the most beautiful moment for me is that, oh, I'm a me. There's no one else like me. And who I was and who I still am and who I will be, all of those are welcome. There's no adjustment needed. There's just that once I have the self-knowledge to navigate who I am, then the question becomes, how can I best express that in the world? And that work never gets tired and it never finishes. So I'm very happy to see your little self going thumbs up back at you. So where can we find out more? If people hear this and they want to get involved with the people, they want to hire them, they want to know about you, tell us the best places to find out more. And of course, we'll include these in the show notes.
Firstly, it's been an absolute pleasure being in conversation with you. You've asked questions that I've never explored. If you want to learn more, get in touch. You can check out our website, www.thepeople.work, or you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or you can just mail us if you're feeling alternative.
Go old school. Send a pigeon. But it's been such a pleasure to have you on, and really, really interesting, inspiring work. So thank you so much for your time today, and I very much look forward to hearing what happens next.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Erica. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast.
Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes.
Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential, enjoying your life, and doing remarkable stuff.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success.
And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosna
And Zoe Schofield. Signing off.